Part 1. The Echo in the Darkness. It was just another Wednesday night. I'd finished another long day at the office, dragging myself home, feeling more like a machine than a man. My apartment on the 4th floor had become a sanctuary, a place where I could switch off from the world, tune out the humdrum of life, and just be alone. My evenings were pretty predictable. I'd grab a quick meal, maybe a beer or two, and then, like clockwork, I'd step out to the window overlooking the backyard to smoke. There was something therapeutic about the routine, watching the empty, dimly lit backyard below. The concrete walls surrounded it, giving it this desolate, forgotten feel. But that silence was everything to me. That night was different. As I leaned against the windowsill, letting the familiar burn of smoke fill my lungs, I noticed a strange flicker of movement near the far corner of the yard, where the shadows pooled thickly. I squinted, thinking it was just a stray cat, maybe a raccoon. But I didn't see anything there. Not really. Just shadows. Then, it happened. A sound cut through the quiet, a scream, faint and distorted, like it was echoing from somewhere far away, barely reaching the surface. It sounded like a woman's voice, strangled and desperate, like she was trying to scream but was somehow restrained, muffled. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. This wasn't just someone in pain. This was someone trapped, helpless. My instincts told me to close the window, step back, and lock myself inside. But my curiosity got the better of me. I stayed there, frozen, straining to hear any more sounds. Nothing. Just silence. The usual street noises seemed distant, almost muted. I took a deep breath, shook off the chills crawling down my spine, and told myself it was nothing. I even laughed a little, a hollow sound that did nothing to ease my nerves. "Just a cat," I muttered, trying to sound casual, as if saying it aloud could make it true. But the next night, Thursday, it happened again. Part 2. The Echo in the Darkness. I'd just come home, went through my routine, and stepped out to the window. This time, I was on edge, staring into the backyard like I was waiting for something. And right on cue, there it was. The same scream, low and struggling, like it was clawing its way up through layers of concrete and steel to reach my ears. The sound seemed to come from the same corner, hidden in those thick shadows. This time I didn't stay quiet. I leaned out the window and called, "Hello? Is someone there?" My voice echoed off the buildings, falling flat against the empty walls. No one answered. My eyes swept over the windows in the adjacent apartments, searching for any lights, any signs that someone else had heard it too. But everything was still, dark, like the world was holding its breath. For the rest of the night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, my mind replaying the sound over and over. I kept picturing someone down there, hidden, waiting, hoping that someone would hear them. And each time I drifted off, I'd wake up, jolted by the memory of that desperate scream. By Friday night, I'd had enough. I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was happening. So instead of just listening, I decided to investigate. I grabbed a flashlight and headed downstairs, my footsteps echoing down the dark stairwell as I made my way to the backyard. The air felt heavier, thicker somehow, like I was walking into something I didn't belong in. As I stepped into the yard, everything felt wrong. The shadows seemed to stretch, pooling around me, swallowing the faint glow of my flashlight. I made my way to that far corner, the one I'd seen movement in, my pulse pounding in my ears. Then I heard it again, a faint muffled whimper coming from somewhere close, somewhere below. My heart raced as I looked down, seeing a faint crack in the ground, almost hidden by dirt and weeds. A small rusty grate was embedded in the concrete, barely large enough to see through. I kneeled, shining my light into the grate, Part 3. The Echo in the Darkness. And that's when I saw it. A pair of eyes stared back at me, wide and panicked, darting from side to side. The woman's face was pale, smeared with dirt, her hair tangled and matted. She mouthed something, her voice hoarse and broken, but I couldn't hear her words. She clawed at the grate, her fingers raw and red, pressing her mouth to the small opening, but the sound that escaped was barely a whisper. My mind struggled to make sense of it. How had she ended up here, beneath the building, trapped in some dark, hidden place? I tried to pull the grate off, but it was bolted tightly, rusted into the concrete. I grabbed my phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers, my voice trembling as I tried to explain what I'd found. The operator took my call, promising to send someone immediately, but every second felt like an eternity. While I waited, I kept talking to her, telling her help was coming, trying to keep her calm. But the longer I waited, the more she seemed to lose hope. Her eyes glazed over, her mouth stopped moving, and she just lay there, staring blankly into the dark. When the police finally arrived, they searched every inch of the building, the surrounding area, even the abandoned basement. But they didn't find her. Not a trace. They told me there was no sign of anyone having been trapped or held below, that the grate was too small for anyone to fit under it. They looked at me like I was crazy, maybe even a suspect, but eventually they left, leaving me alone with the silence. Since that night, I've stopped going to the window. I've tried to convince myself it was all in my head, that the stress from work had finally taken its toll. But some nights, when the world is quiet and the shadows are thick, I swear I can still hear it. That faint, strangled scream, echoing from somewhere deep below. And sometimes, just sometimes, I see those eyes staring back at me from the darkness, begging me to find her.